Suzanne Barron here, founder of Christ the True Light. Thought to maybe start mentioning at the beginning of my videos for the person who's never read or seen my face that what I am doing on these videos is I am reading through the Bible and I am giving it in a way that nobody's doing. I'm going verse by verse by verse and I'm discussing things that people aren't talking about in Scripture. And I'm trying to reach those who believe in God. I'm trying to reach everybody, but it's important that you know that I am trying to reach people that believe in God, have picked up the Bible a couple times, and they don't understand it. If you listen to my message, you will understand Scripture. If you've ever wanted to have somebody help you understand it, to where you can learn to pick it up and study it for yourself, because it is important that you do study it for yourself, but majority of the time people don't because they don't understand it. If you've ever wanted somebody to help you understand Scripture so that you can reach a point where you're capable of picking it up and learn it for yourself, I'm the one you should be watching. I'm in Isaiah 10. Woe to those who make unjust laws, to those who issue oppressive decrees. There are some Jewish customs. I've heard it said once. I was talking about a wife. I can't remember what it said, but it was too hard of a law. It was like, it's not her fault that her husband died. Like, it was too hard of a law. It was rough. And that's what I see in that, but I can't remember what was said, so I'll just move on. To those who issue oppressive decrees, to deprive the poor of their rights, to withhold justice from the oppressed of my people. Now, when we're talking about oppressed people, those who I'm trying to help are like mental health patients. They're extremely oppressed and they're diagnosed as sick. I struggle with saying this because symptoms of mental health is very much real. It's real. The suffering is real, but it's not mental health. It's not. Okay, if a woman is depressed or a man is depressed, it's a depression. Just think about depression. They're like severely depressed. Why are they depressed? There's a reason why they're depressed. You think medication is going to solve that problem? They're depressed because life is falling down. Or say a woman she's mentally sick, she's got depression and battered woman syndrome, right? She's been beat down her entire life by men. And so she's sick, right? We prescribe her medication because she's depressed and her mind's not right. Is that really a mental depression? Is that really a chemical imbalance? Or is it because Satan has used men to beat the spirit in her? Does she really need medication? That's one example. That's one example. Because somebody's having intrusive thoughts, are they mentally sick? Or is it a demon inside their mind, inside of them, talking to them, convincing them to do bad things? Is it really a chemical imbalance? Do you not know that these symptoms of mental health have been around since creation? The same symptoms we label and diagnose and prescribe prescriptions for have been around since ancient civilizations. Is it really a chemical imbalance? What causes a chemical imbalance? Drugs? Okay, what about for those who've never taken drugs? What causes the chemical imbalance for that person? Because people who who take drugs and people who don't take drugs experience the same thing. And in our society, there's a term called targeted individuals. Now, their symptoms are the same symptoms as schizophrenic people, paranoid schizophrenic people. They believe that they're being watched. A neighbor came by last night. She said she was home alone. She's an older lady. She felt like somebody was watching her in her home. She had to come over and sit for a while because she was too afraid to be home. She felt something watching her. Some people go so far that they believe in targeted individuals and the government's harassing them, conspiracy theory stuff, but it's the same symptom of a schizoid person. Now, here's the kicker on that. We diagnose them and prescribe them the pharmaceuticals for the schizo, but if they claim targeted individuals, we believe that. If you've never heard that term, you might think that I'm losing my mind, but there is a whole group of people out there that do believe in this. Targeted individuals. It's no longer a conspiracy theory in their thought process. It's literally happening. And they are taking the governments to court. One guy in California won over $10 million. It's not the government. It can't be the government. Think about this. The symptoms of a schizophrenic person is the exact same, has been the same. Those symptoms have been diagnosed, what they experience has been diagnosed for schizophrenia for about 100 years. But the symptoms of schizophrenia have been around since ancient civilization. Think about this. Now, here recently, within the last 20 years, the symptoms that have been around since ancient civilization have been what has diagnosed schizoids for the last 100 years are now symptoms of targeted individuals. And we believe that. There are symptoms follow line of electronic harassment and stuff like that. It's not. How can it be? First, technology hasn't been around that long. It's been in the earth. Electricity was discovered 250 years ago. It's been here since God created Earth. It's just been discovered 250 years ago. Electricity, which has turned into technology. It can't be the same. Stumbled words. I meant to say it is the same, but it cannot be. How do I even say it? See, it's spiritual, it's invisible. It cannot be all three, right? It can't be all three. It cannot be, but it is the same. It's all the same. I know that's confusing. I get it. Um, it's scriptural. Voice to skull technology. Let me spit this one in here, okay? If you've never heard of this stuff, I dare you to Google it. It's called voice to skull technology. They have nicknamed it Voice of God. This device, okay, I'm gonna show you something right here so it kind of clear some confusion up. This device, ancient civilization, so hold on, all right? This device is said to work like this. There's a chip in your head. The government put a chip in your head. And not all targeted individuals in voice to skull technology believe in this chip in your head. But go to qwave.com, QUWAV.com. They sell these devices that's meant to like counteract electronic harassment, stuff like that. They're like $300. Guaranteed it don't work because it's not the government. But voice to skull technology, aka voice of God, is supposed to work like this. There's a device beaming on you. Say you have the chip. The chip is what picks up the voices. Say you don't have the chip. Somehow it's just beamed right on you like radiation. And people around you can't hear it. That's why you're the only one who can hear it. Because it's supposed to hit you. You can be standing right next to somebody and they don't hear the voices, but you do. It says that your ear, technology does this. Your ear cannot hear the voices. That's why the person next to you can't hear it. But your mind registers it. Voice to skull technology V2K. Google it. Google it because that's what they're saying. Day of Pentecost in Acts. Ancient civilization, right? As today's world, it's used by Satan. God used it in Acts. He used V2K in Acts. Voice of God. Peter spoke Hebrew. He spoke to a crowd of thousands of people. And each person in that crowd heard Peter's Hebrew language. Their ears heard Hebrew, but their minds registered their own native tongue. Each person out there heard Peter's Hebrew language in their own native tongue. Peter only knew how to speak Hebrew. That's a V2K. It's not the same. And I can prove it if you stay with me. I can prove the government is innocent. I can prove that the symptoms are, I can prove them here. I can prove them, but it does take time. It does take an entire Bible. I can prove it. I'm trying to help those who are suffering. Those who are suffering are the ones who have no knowledge of Scripture. You ever notice that? Have you ever noticed that? Those who are suffering have no knowledge of Scripture. What Christian is suffering a little bits of mental health? Do you ever see schizophrenics sitting in a congregation? You don't. You ever see any targeted individuals sitting inside of a congregation? You don't. I'm trying to help those who are oppressed, making widows their prey, and robbing the fatherless. What will you do on the day of reckoning when disaster comes from afar? To whom will you run for help? Where will you leave your riches? Hopefully, there's something good in this chapter that I can speak on. Nothing will remain but to cringe among the captives or fall among the slain. Yet for all of this, his anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised. Woe to the Assyrian, the rod of my anger. I guess since I'm about halfway through, I need to go ahead and say this. It's poetic. That's what makes it difficult. Okay, it's poetic, and I'm not seeing anything right now that I can verbalize on. So just stay with me. I send him against a godless nation. I dispatch him against a power who anger me, to seize loot and snatch plunder, and to trample them down like mud on the streets. But this is not what he intends. This is not what he has in mind. His purpose is to destroy, to put an end to many nations. Are not my commanders all kings, he says? Has not Kalno Fard like Kar Chemish? Is not Hamath like Arpad, and Samaria like Damascus? Now, I say this. I'm doing the best I can. If you go to my website, www.christtruelight.com, you'll get a very in-depth studies. I mean, I've already built a lot. Okay, there's a lot of blogs to read. There's also other videos you can watch too that I speak more on. Whenever I do make it to doing a blog on Isaiah, I will pick every single word here. I will take this name Karchemish and I will type it in and try to figure out how many verses say that name, and I will compare it. I will take a Strong's Concordance and I will look at that word if it gives it a number and try to root it back to understand it better. If it takes me an entire day on a single verse, that's what I will do. I will look at every verse that says Samaria, the context of it, not just the verse, the context of it. Every verse that says Damascus, the context of it. And I will look at all of them. And then by that time, I might have something better to give you for Isaiah 10. As my hand sees the kingdoms of the idols, kingdoms whose images excel those of Jerusalem and Samaria. Shall I not deal with Jerusalem and her images, as I dealt with Samaria and her idols? When the Lord had finished all his work against Mount Zion and Jerusalem, he will say, I will punish the king of Assyria for the willful pride of his heart, and for the haughty look in his eyes. Okay, willful pride in his heart. Pride. I just want to talk about pride since I ain't talking about much. Pride is bad. You're too pride about yourself. But to be proud of your children is okay. You're raising them, and you see them grow. God can be proud of you. You can be proud of your children. For God though, right? Because they're not really yours. But it's not good to have self-pride. My pastor wrote me a letter and told me to empty myself and humble myself. I think that we can look at certain people and misjudge them easily. I say I'm a prophet. I am the chosen prophet that's been selected. I say that. Now, that sounds like I'm being pretty arrogant and prideful to some people because I'm taking a high title. Okay, a clip in. You'll often see these clip ins, and the cause to it is because I am not an eloquent speaker. I am untrained as a speaker. I admit this. Now, I watch every video before I post them, and I'll saw something that I know somebody would pick at, even though I clear it up like the very next sentence. I just know how people are. I said it wasn't given to me. It was given to me, is what I was supposed to say. And I cleared up the very next sentence by saying I wasn't like Moses. Now, I do want to speak on that, though, at the same time. We all sin, okay? There's sin you don't see, all right? I'm a sinner, okay? You're a sinner. We're all sinners. People don't want to see this, or it's hard to get people to see this. It is hard to get people to see this. Every time I plug this computer up to charge it, I'm sinning. I'm not going to touch on that, but it's the truth. Okay. That's the sin people don't see that I talk about. There's sin you don't see. I say that often. There's sin you don't see. That's one you don't see. All right. Now, I have told my daughter this. If God stood her whole life growing up, if God stood in front of you, she would complain about sweeping. I'm like, if God stood in front of you and he told you to sweep that floor, he was standing right there. Are you going to tell him no? She said, no. I said, well, that's what you got to do. Now, there's so many times that we do actually say, no, God, we're not doing that. I'm not doing that. So many times we actually do that. And we don't even realize that we're doing that. We do it all the time and we don't see it. But I knew better when I did figure out that this actually is God speaking to me, and I'm not delusional and I'm not psychotic, and this is actually a spiritual thing, and God is trying to show me something. When I figured that part out all the way, without a doubt, I know this is God. There was no, I'm not doing it. I just knew better. I knew that because of Moses' attitude, Moses didn't get to see the promised land because because I had already had scriptural knowledge. I knew that story. And I knew that no matter what, you do not say no. Now, the worst thing I could ever do is deny that he has called me. That is the worst thing I can ever do, is to deny who I am when I know it to be true. That is the worst thing I could ever do. I am no better than anybody, and I know this, but I have been called to deliver a message, and I am doing the very best that I can to deliver that message. Who would you expect him to send? An eloquent speaker? Who did he send each time? In fact, he sent ineloquent speakers, didn't he? Paul? Moses? Who would you expect to see? You ought to expect to see somebody who is very untrained as a speaker. Moses, Paul, both said, I don't have a trained tongue. Title. It was not given to me. I wasn't like Moses where I said, no, I'm not going to do it. But in some ways, I was like, really? It's got to be me. Not like I didn't want to do it, but kind of like I didn't want to do it. It's really got to be me because it's difficult. And I know that all the prophets spoke boldly and they had authority. But I can't claim that authority because then nobody will ever listen to me in this world. But when they read scripture, Christians, when they read scripture, they recognize the authority of a prophet and they respect that prophet's words. How can I prove my authority? That I do have, humbly so. It's very difficult. I'm not trying to take away anything from the Christians and their lessons on how to live godly lives and how to win you sinners over to them and how to steer you in the right direction, because that's all they're trying to do. The Great Commission, that's all they're trying to do. They're trying to win your soul for heaven, for their God. That is really all they're trying to do. When you judge them because you think they're judging you, the word is not just judgment, it's called discernment. They're discerning the difference between right and wrong, and they have discerned that you are living in sin. They're not judging you. It is not their place to put the hammer down on you. And they know that. But because you are full of sin, you get defensive. And you don't know how to accept that because you don't want to change your life. And that is the truth. And that's the problem. You don't want to change. They're discerning because they love you as a creator, a being of God. They might not even know you, but God created you, and for that, they are trying to save your soul. That is all they are trying to do. I want you to hear me when I say this. There is no greater love than that. They don't want to see you burn. That's where you're headed, most of you. And the fact of the matter is you know it too. You know it. You don't need anybody to say it to you because you already know it. They're just trying to pull you back. Are you jealous? I had to go fill my coffee up and think about what verse it is that I want to read for that statement, but I couldn't find it. So the closest one I got talks about authority. And when I say authority, I'm talking about cops and judges and stuff like that. But you can use this. If I say it right, you'll understand it. If I don't say it right, then you might not understand it. I'm not an eloquent speaker. It's Romans 13. I couldn't think of the other one. Anything else that would help in this matter. But it's Romans 13. It's right after the book of Acts. Issue with you feeling like they're reprimanding you. Here it is. This sinner, I'm talking to you. You already know you live in sin. You already know it. You really don't need anyone to tell you that you are, because you know the wrong. As a sinner myself, when I do something wrong, I know that I have done wrong. I don't tell people I've done wrong. I keep it to myself, right? I don't want people to know it. And when I'm called out on it, it don't feel good. It don't feel good. Most of the time it's because I'm embarrassed. Right? Now, people get angry. Anger is not an emotion. Anger is not an emotion. It is a reaction to an emotion. I wrote a letter to my pastor. I said, I'm angry with you. I'm hurt. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm embarrassed, so I'm hurt. Or I'm embarrassed, so I get mad. You rebel. Please understand, I'm not judging you. I'm trying to show you what the problem is. Okay? Because that Christian is not trying to cause you harm. They are trying to win your soul. You already know you're doing wrong, but you will not turn from that wrong, and they see that. Now, this kind of applies because the issue is your conscience. It's your conscience, that moral instinct in you, not your conscience. It's your conscience. Conscience is SCIOUS. Conscience is SCIENCES. Conscience and conscience. The issue is your conscience, that moral instinct. Conscience. Okay, I'm saying it like this on purpose. Okay. All right. Now, it says, let everyone, this Romans 13:1, let everyone be subject to governing authorities. It's talking about police officers and stuff like that, and judges and the rulers, government. For there is no authority except that which God has established. So if God established that authority, then we should respect it. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. You cannot refute that. Whoever rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right. Have you ever wanted to be free of the fear of the cops? Who's afraid of the police officers? Have you ever wanted to be free of that fear? Stop using drugs. Stop selling drugs. Stop stealing. Stop raping. Stop harmful. Stop living that life, and you won't have that fear. You won't have that fear. Cop will be just completely normal to you. Do you want to be free of the fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended. For the authority of God's servants for good. They are authority for the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid. For rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. Not conscience, conscience. Moral values. Spelt two different ways. AI is conscience, but she is not conscience. She's alert and aware of her own surroundings. That's consciousness. But she is not conscience because she has no moral instinct. Now, how can I equate this to the problem I was just talking about? They are doing their job, calling you out, because that is what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to help lead you in the right direction. And it is your conscience that's the problem, because you refuse to change. Therefore, they are the enemy to you. But you're not the enemy to them. They're not my enemy, even though they don't believe me. I've got to find people who believe me and are willing to change their life so they can stand with me. After 3 years, I've almost given up on the church. Even though the ones who are suffering go to the church for help. Let me find my place. I think I was on 10:12. So, when the Lord has finished all his work against Mount Zion and Jerusalem, he will say, I will punish the king of Assyria for the willful pride of his heart. That's right, pride of his heart and haughty look in his eyes. Slow down, Suzanne. For he says, by the strength of my hand I have done this, and by my wisdom, because I have understanding. I removed the boundaries of nations, plundered the treasures. Like a mighty one, I subdued their kings. As one reaches into a nest, so my hand reached for the wealth of the nations. As people gather abandoned eggs, I gathered all the countries, not one flapping a wing, or opened its mouth to chirp. Okay, as people gathered abandoned eggs, think about gathering some eggs. When they finally hatch open, they're going to look at you and say, Mama. That's what birds do. Pretty much all birds do that. The first thing they see is their mom. But not one flapped a wing or opened its mouth to chirp. So pretty much they're dead, aren't they? It's poetic. You have to look at it in a spiritual way. It's poetic. As people gathered abandoned eggs, so I gathered all the countries. Not one flapped a wing or opened its mouth to chirp. Dead. They didn't call Mama. Does the axe raise itself above the person who swings it? Or does the saw boast against the one who uses it? Mechanics, think about that one out there. Have you ever noticed? I've read a study on this. Drug addicts are really smart people. They can take nothing and make it into anything. They're so bright. Schizophrenic patients are bright. Albert Einstein was schizoid and manic. Nancy Andreasen. She is our schizophrenia go-to lady of this entire generation, okay? She has been in neuroscience for 50 years. Nancy Andreasen. And she has said in her own studies that mental health problems, schizophrenic people, psychosis symptoms are most prevalently found in smarter people. Smarter people are psychotic. Now, does God create a brain like that? No, he does not. He expects you to use those smarts for his will. But Satan is winning, and he is turning your smarts. That man of sin is turning your smarts into symptoms of psychosis. Nancy Andreasen, neuroscience for 50 years. She was the first one to do a schizophrenic MRI. She set the positive and negative scales. You have positive symptoms and negative symptoms to schizophrenia. She is the one who created that. Nancy Andreasen. Look her up. Does the axe rise above the person who swings it, or the saw boast against the one who uses it? If a rod were to wield the person who lifts, as if a rod were to wield the person who lifts it up, or a club brandish the one who is not wood. Therefore the Lord Almighty, will send a wasting disease upon his sturdy warriors' legs. Under his pomp a fire will be kindled. Plagues. He sends the plagues. God, your creator, is the one who sends plagues. We counteract those plagues with pharmakia, vaccines, pharmakia, trying to survive the plague. We counteract them with vaccines, pharmakia, healing poisonous herb, healing poisonous snake. He sends plagues as warnings. He sends every plague. Every plague he sends. COVID-19 was sent by God. China did not send COVID-19. China was hit first because they are in Asia. Asia is the powerhouse for robotics and artificial intelligence. Global problem, global plague. Learn to see God in our world. Therefore, the Lord Almighty, will send a wasting disease on his sturdy warriors. Under the pomp of fire will be kindled like a blazing flame. The light of Israel become a fire, the Holy One a flame. In a single day it will be burned and consumed. His thorns and his briars. Thorns and briars. Thorns, that's sin. Barbs in your eyes make you blind. Thorns in your side, sin. The splendor of his forests and fertile fields, it will be completely destroyed, as when a sick person wastes away, and the remaining tree of his forest will be so few, like a child could write them down. Thinking about Christmas coming up. I was thinking about doing a blog, but I want to say it because I hadn't got figured out how I want to say it. But think about Christmas coming up. Jesus said the kingdom belongs to such as these. Those three men brought gifts to Jesus. Santa Claus, the word Christmas, the letter X means Christ. Numeral number used in Hebrew language, or Greek language, Greek language means Christ. X means Christ, and it is where we get our word Christmas from. That magical image, right? Giving gifts to little children. The kingdom belongs to such as these. They have spiritual gifts. I spoke to my stuffed animals as a child. They spoke to me. I've talked to people. A woman one time, she said her mom would put her in the closet, and she didn't have anything in the closet to speak to her. It was just the spiders on the wall. And the spiders spoke to her. She's been schizophrenic since she was a little girl. So have I. Because I remember the voices my stuffed animals used to speak to me. Till my parents, my mom, told me I was too old for that and to stop speaking to my stuffed animals, ripping that gift away from me. So was drugs the cause to my schizophrenia? I was high when my schizophrenia actually, or not high, I'm sorry. I was not high. I've had drug addiction in the past. I was not high when my schizophrenia started. I was sober. I had just got sober. That's true. But I have been sober since 2020. This hit me in 2021. All right. And I'm cured of schizophrenia, but I still hear a voice. So technically, I'm still schizophrenic then. I don't have any paranoia. I am not afraid anymore. I'm not hiding under my bed from the law, from the government. I don't think there's a chip in my head. I'm not afraid of technology, even though I know it's bad. There's no satellite beaming down on me. Demons aren't telling me to kill myself anymore, or my boyfriend, or the people in my home. They're not doing that. I don't have any of that. My family thinks I'm sick because I won't get off this computer. But what am I doing on this computer? What am I doing? Am I sick because this is what I do all day? I was schizophrenic as a child, too. It was not drugs. My stuffed animals spoke to me until the viper and my mom ripped every one of them away from me because I was too old to talk to them. The splendor of his forest, Christmas, subliminal message, children, gifts, subliminal message. Splendor of his forests and fertile fields it will completely destroy, as when a sick person wastes away. I'm on verse 19. And the remaining trees of his forest will be so few that a child could write them down. Okay. That day, the remnant of Israel, the survivors of Jacob, will no longer rely on him who struck them down, but will truly rely on the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. So who struck them down? Obviously, it was not the Holy One of Israel. It can get confusing, okay? I will harden Pharaoh's heart. I'll tell you how confusing it gets. I will harden Pharaoh's heart. God hardened Pharaoh's heart. If you've ever known any scripture, if you've ever been to church ever, you know the story of Exodus. I will harden Pharaoh's heart. God hardened Pharaoh's heart. I did a video where I proved it. The scripture says sin is the one who hardened Pharaoh's heart. So is sin I? Is sin God? Yes. The answer is yes. Sin hardened his heart. God hardened his heart. Sin is God. The false God. The other God. In the beginning, God created. That word God in the first verse of the entire Bible, that word God is a plural God. Strong's Concordance that yourself. H430. Plural God. A remnant will remain, a remnant of Jacob. Will return to the mighty God. Though your people be like the sand by the sea, Israel, only a remnant will remain. Destruction has been decreed, overwhelming the righteous. The Lord Almighty will carry out the destruction decreed upon the whole land. Therefore, this is what the Lord Almighty says. My people who live in Zion, do not be afraid of the Assyrians, who beat you with a rod and lift up a club against you as Egypt did. Egypt. Anytime you hear the word Egypt, you're going to recognize bad. That Egyptian pyramid, our American dollar. You cannot love both God and money. Out of Egypt I've called my son. It is the image of the Antichrist, but Satan did not put it there. Christ did. Subliminal message. How many bills have changed in America? The $5 bill has changed how many times? How many times has the $2 bill changed? We don't see them very often. How many times has it changed? What about $10 bill? $20 bill? 50? 100? How many times have they changed? How many times has that $1 bill changed? It hasn't. It doesn't. Why? Because that pyramid's there. Why would he choose a $1 bill? What 2-year-old hasn't put their hand on a $1 bill? What 1-year-old hasn't put their hand on a $1 bill? That $1 bill has touched every single one of our hands so that we could see that pyramid. Out of Egypt, I've called my son. You cannot love both God and money. Christ put that image there. Illuminati, subliminal message. Christ is Illuminati. Learn to see him in our world. Destruction has been decreed, overwhelming the righteous. The Lord Almighty will carry out destruction decreed upon the land. Therefore, this is what the Lord Almighty says: My people live in Zion. Do not be afraid of the Syrians. There it is. Who beat you with a rod and lift up a club against you as Egypt did. Very soon my anger against you will end, and my wrath will be discredited to their destruction. The Lord Almighty will lash them with a whip, as when he struck down Midian at the rock of Oreb. He will raise his staff over the waters as he did in Egypt. Who raised the waters? Who raised their staff over Egypt? Who did? Moses and Aaron. Can't remember exactly which one did, but Aaron had it when he went into Egypt. But I know there are some verses that said Moses did have the rod too, so I don't want to confuse you. He will raise his staff as he did in Egypt. I thought it was Moses and Aaron that had it. This is a long time past. How is it Moses and Aaron? The Spirit is the one inside of Moses and Aaron. How he did it. God's finger carved out the 10 Commandments. Moses was God's finger. God cannot lift a piece of paper. He cannot do it. But God just picked up paper. God cannot pick up a pencil or a headband. He's spitting things right here. A headband. God cannot pick up a headband. He cannot do it. He can't do it. But God just picked up a headband. God dropped the headband. God picked it up. God dropped it. God picked it up. God cannot pick up a headband. But God just picked it up. The Lord Almighty will wash them with. I don't know where I'm at. I need a minute. I gotta calm down because I get excited. I'm sorry. Just give me a minute. It's chapter 10, verse 27. We're almost done. And that day their burden will be lifted from their shoulders, their yoke from their neck. The yoke will be broken because we have grown so fat. They enter Aeth. They pass through Migron. They store supplies at Michmash. They go over the pass and say, we will camp overnight at Geba. Ramah trembles. Gibeah and Saul flees. Cry out, daughters. Cry out, daughter Galem. Listen, Lashan. Poor Anathan. Madmenah is in flight. The people of Gebin take cover. It's poetic. This day they will halt at Nob. They will shake their fist at the mount of daughter Zion, at the hill of Jerusalem. See, the Lord Almighty, will lop off the boughs with great power. The lofty trees will be felled. The tall ones will be brought low. He will cut down the forest thickets with an axe. Lebanon will fall before the mighty one. Okay, I can't give you anything on that. But I want to talk about the Lord Almighty. The spirits are the one who looked at Jesus and said, you are the Son of the Most High God. I want you to imagine this is a shelf. See the shelves? 1 shelf, 2 shelf, 3 shelf, 4 shelves. You are the God of the Most High, the Son of the Most High God. That God's on the top shelf. Who's under here? Most High. Why would he even say Most High if there was not something underneath him? The spirits said that. Demons said that. Invisible voices that have no forms. that Jesus heard say that. Jesus heard invisible voices that have no form say, "You're the Son of the Most High God," because you cannot see spirits, and not everybody has the ears to hear. Please share this. There are people suffering. That targeted individual stuff, they're being pushed to suicide. People are killing themselves because of the suffering they're enduring. Depression, they're suffering. Demons speaking to them, pushing them to suicide. I need you to please share it. Go to www.christthetruelight.com. You'll get a more in-depth study, better studies. Read them yourselves. They have links everywhere. It takes you to all my evidence, the things that other people have created that I use to confirm everything I say. www.christthetruelight.com. Please share this video. Share it right now. Thank you.